Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
It's our News Watch unit for the month of April. And today we've got some, I would say, maybe depressing stories. And one, of course, is about suicide, and the other one is about death. So if you...
I think they're both about death, Tom.
Pretty much, yeah. So these are things that do happen in society. We all got to pass away sometime. So I guess we do need to discuss these things from time to time, although most people try to avoid these subjects. But the first one is kind of like online bullying and young people getting access to content which encourages them to do nasty things to themselves. That definitely needs to be talked about. And then there's another story about something called death cafes. Interesting. You don't go there to die, but you go to these death cafes to talk about that.
Oh, so I wonder if it's okay to talk about more positive subjects at death cafes or if it's just limited to discussions around death, which is sad. It's hard, but it is a part of life. And as you get older, you realize that more and more people that are in your life are going to be leaving, so it's kind of hard. But yeah, this is a particular cafe where they have a theme going on. There are other cafes out there that have themes, of course, that are probably a little bit happier than this. But we need to talk about this stuff, It's part of just being a human being. So we're going to get started by reading through our 2 news stories, and then we'll be back.
Teenagers' suicide leads to calls for better online safety. In November 2017, British teenager Molly Russell killed herself after months of exposure to negative online content. Last September, judges ruled that her suicide was caused by depression and the effects of the online content, which included posts relating to self-harm, suicide, and depression. During the inquest, both the senior coroner and Molly's father, Ian, called on social media companies to do more to prevent children from being exposed to this kind of content. The issue is that social media sites use algorithms to recommend content that users might like. Unfortunately, this can make it difficult to escape negative posts. In addition, representatives from tech companies admitted during the hearing that some of the content Molly had watched should have been removed or blocked. Some posts actually romanticized self-harm. Since Molly's death, the Russell family has campaigned for better online protection so that their family tragedy will not be repeated. Ian Russell said, "It's time to protect our innocent young people instead of allowing platforms to prioritize their profits by monetizing their misery."
Death cafes, safe spaces to discuss death. Death is an inevitable part of life that everyone has to confront. However, many people find it difficult to talk about death. To help these people, various individuals and organizations have set up death cafes, safe spaces where people can discuss this taboo subject. Everyone is welcome to participate in a death cafe event, which is a regular meeting set up by people with personal and professional experience with death. One such cafe is the Tassie Death Cafe in Hobart, Australia. It was set up in 2019 and hosts regular events. Attendees range from 18 to over 80 years of age, and no topics are off limits. Another cafe is in Newark, UK. Here, volunteers from care centers help people deal with grief, funerals, and more. They offer practical advice as well, including a life book covering everything that needs to be dealt with when a relative passes away, such as bank accounts and official documents. In ways such as these, death cafes make it easier for people to face what happens when life comes to an end.
Okay, let's discuss the content of today's lesson. By the way, that word content is going to occur in our lesson today, so pay special attention here. Yes, let's talk about the things that we have in our lesson for today, the content. And the first story is about a teenager's suicide in the United Kingdom there, and the suicide leads to calls for better online safety. So, of course, this is a tragedy. A young girl in her teens, 14 to 19 years of age, committed suicide because of things that she saw on the internet. And this has caused people to try to bring about better online safety so that more children don't think about this again.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's happening more and more because kids sometimes are lonely or left alone. Their parents aren't watching what they're doing. You know, everybody gets busy with their lives. But the internet offers a lot of very harmful material to anybody, actually. And if you're in those very sensitive teenage years, you tend to take everything in, and it's magnified quite a bit. You know, you haven't completely grown up, and you are dealing with so many changes in your mind and your body, and it's hard during this period of time. Kids can be cruel, but also there are bad people out there posting things in a way to encourage kids to do self-harm or commit suicide. So you've got to watch out for those people too. This isn't just about bullying. These are about, this lesson in particular is about all the forms of just very negative and dangerous material on the internet that can lead to kids, especially teens, committing suicide.
Okay, so let's look at the content here. In November 2017, British teenager Molly Russell killed herself after months of exposure to negative online content. There's the word content there. That just refers to the things that are there, the information on the internet. And she had been exposed to this negative online content. She was playing with her phone. She was on the computer, surfing the net, as we say, and she found some information that ended up being harmful to her as she was exposed to this negative online content. And there certainly is a lot of that out there. If you pay attention, there are what we call trolls out there who are sending nasty messages to people. And then, of course, some websites themselves have some kind of information that isn't really helpful to people.
Yeah, this poor girl, Molly Russell, a British teenager, killed herself after being exposed to some really negative online content.
And last September, judges ruled that her suicide was caused by depression and the effects of the online content, which included posts relating to self-harm, suicide, and depression. So this went to court, and there were judges, and they made a conclusion. They ruled that her suicide was caused by various things. Depression, which means you feel pretty bad about things and yourself, and also she committed suicide because of the effects of online content. And that online content included posts related to harming yourself, killing yourself, and depression.
Yeah, now this is a system that we don't use in the United States, but it is used in the United Kingdom, where if someone dies and you don't know the cause of death, they will have a group of experts come together and they'll hold an inquest. An inquest will just look at the evidence they have to see if it was a suicide, was it a murder? Was somebody else responsible for this? And then they will make a ruling. In America, what happens is if someone dies, their body will be examined by what we call the medical examiner. It's the same as a coroner here used in our article. And they'll tell the police what they think was the cause of death. And if there's enough evidence, then the police can charge a person with a crime. But we don't have inquests like they do here. in the UK, but it's interesting because they bring in people to give testimony, or as they say in the UK system, to give evidence. We just say give testimony, but to give evidence. And Molly's father was called in as well. So that's what an inquest is. It's a legal procedure, and it has a group of people that come together to look at the evidence and determine whether someone committed suicide, if there was someone responsible, or maybe even if it was a murder.
Right, so we've got the coroner here. That's the person who handles death and does autopsies and things like
Looks
that.
at a dead body, yeah.
Exactly. And then Molly's father called on social media companies to do more to prevent children from being exposed to this kind of content. So here we've got the verb phrase to call on, which means you kind of make a request to people. You sort of plead with people. Yes, media companies, would you do this? Would you look at your content and try to remove the content that can be harmful to children?
We also use call on to talk about a teacher in a class asking a question and students raising their hands. The teacher will then call on someone to give an answer, to respond. So we use it that way too, to call on. Oh, the teacher called on me in class today, Mom, and I was really scared. So you can be called on in class, but here they're asking publicly for people to come forward to do something. And here that dad is asking social media companies to do more to prevent children from being exposed to this kind of content. Moving on, it says this issue is that the social media sites use algorithms, those are mathematical formulas, to recommend content that users might like. Sadly, if a young person is already looking up things about suicide or self-harm, those algorithms will suggest even more websites or social media sites that they can go to. And this is exactly what we don't want happening. And I know in America, they're actually trying to make a change in this so that these algorithms won't keep giving these young kids even more opportunities to read depressing things. And one company is being sued for that right now in the United States.
Okay, so those algorithms can affect the content that you see. So we can make some recommendations here for better content, and those users might like that content better.
To recommend, it just means to suggest something to someone else based on your own maybe experience or usage. To recommend teachers or restaurants or, whatever you feel good about that you think somebody else would enjoy.
Okay, moving on here, it says, unfortunately, the bad thing is, this can make it difficult to escape negative posts. So indeed, we've got these algorithms and they recommend content for people, and that does lead to negative posts coming into your feed. I get these kind of suggestions on Facebook and YouTube all the time for content that I'm not really interested in, but for some reason they thought because I clicked on one site before I might be interested in something else. That's kind of how it works. I think we've all seen that before.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition, representatives from tech companies, technology companies, admitted during the hearing or the inquest that some of the content Molly had watched should have been removed or blocked. So they did confess, that stuff shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
It should have been removed. It should have been blocked.
And then it says some posts actually romanticized self-harm. If you romanticize something, you make it appear more appealing and wonderful than it actually is. So sometimes kids can romanticize things like self-harm or even committing suicide. It looks very dramatic. And some of our shows that are being produced, for example, on Netflix, romanticize suicide for kids. And parents need to be aware of that and block those shows so their kids aren't exposed to it. It doesn't help at all. So don't romanticize bad things, negative things, evil things. Since Molly's death, the Russell family has campaigned for better online protection so that their family tragedy will not be repeated. If you campaign for something, you usually have an issue that you feel strongly about, some sort of social issue that affects society, and you get out there and give your opinion and try to get people involved in changing the law or maybe improving the law, doing something to help society that way.
Right, they're campaigning for better protection so that their family tragedy will not be repeated. A tragedy, of course, is something bad that happens if somebody is killed, if somebody commits suicide. Basically, if something bad happens, it's a tragedy. And tragic is the adjective. Oh, that was tragic that she killed herself, And Ian Russell, the father, said, "It's time to protect our innocent young people instead of allowing platforms to prioritize their profits by monetizing their misery." Now, if you prioritize something, you make that thing your priority, or you decide that thing is more important than other things. Sometimes you need to prioritize your life to stress the things that are important in your life and not pay so much attention to the less important things. You need to recognize what's more important and what's not so important.
Yeah, and here's a word that you're seeing a lot these days. If you're a YouTube fan, if you're on YouTube watching YouTubers a lot, they'll often talk about how their video was demonetized or it's still monetized. If something is monetized, it just means there's a way to earn money from that thing. So, as you know, YouTube, if they don't like what you're broadcasting or recording, they will demonetize you, meaning you don't get paid for the number of clicks and people watching what you do. Well, this father is asking these platforms to think more about the kids and instead of just how much money they're making off misery. And that's what some of these websites offer, just misery for people.
Well, we wish them the best of luck, and now it's time to take a break, but stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, guys. This is our all-English unit. No Chinese teacher today. You're probably wondering why you didn't get to hear the Chinese teacher during the break. Well, it's because it's our all-English unit. We finished talking about the first story. It's a news story. The headline was Teenager Suicide Leads to Calls for Better Online Safety. And now we're moving on to our next story. This headline reads, and that's how we say it. The headline reads, it's not like the headline's reading something out loud, but that's how we express it. The headline reads, Death Cafes, Safe Spaces to Discuss Death.
Interesting. Of course, people go to cafes all the time to have a meal, maybe a bar or a tavern, and they go there to talk to the bartender or whatever, maybe about their problems. And let's discuss this here. Death is an inevitable part of life that everyone has to confront. It's inevitable. You cannot avoid it. However, many people find it difficult to talk about death. If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine, but maybe some people do need to talk about it. Maybe they have a fatal disease or they've just lost someone close to them and they really need to talk about it with somebody when nobody else really wants to talk about it. So maybe this is a place they can go to have such a discussion. And to help these people, various individuals and organizations have set up death cafes, safe places where people can discuss this taboo subject. It's taboo in Chinese society to actually talk about death or mention the word.
That's true.
If you say that word, then it might happen. So, yeah, you better not say it. So this might probably never happen in Taiwan. I don't think they're actually ever going to allow death cafes to become popular. That's my opinion, because it's taboo.
It would bring in bad luck, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk about this topic, you better find somebody some other way.
So if something's taboo, it's deemed or considered improper or unacceptable or maybe prohibited or excluded from doing or talking about in certain areas. So, yeah, it's considered taboo. Now, I've been told that if I take a cab or a taxi in Taiwan, I say cab more. If I take a cab, that it's kind of taboo to bring up politics.
Right.
But I'm always interested to hear what our cab drivers think about things. And I've learned a lot just talking to the cabbies in Taiwan, which is kind of fun. So a taboo, yeah. Or maybe if someone's just lost a pet, it's kind of taboo to talk about your own pet and how happy you are about it. Just to be sensitive is really what's important here. Now, everyone is welcome to participate in a Death Cafe event, which is a regular meeting that they set up, and people who are involved have personal and professional experience with death. So they may have gone through a passing away of someone close to them, or they might be a therapist or a psychologist or, somebody who tends to work with people who have suffered losses.
Okay, let's move on now to the next paragraph. It says, one such cafe is the Tassie Death Cafe in Hobart, Australia. So this is an example of a death cafe. It's called the Tassie Death Cafe, and it's in Australia there. It was set up in 2019, just a couple of years ago, and it hosts regular events. So they have regular events there in which people can go and discuss death. Again, if that's something they need to talk about with somebody, they'll have people there who know what they're talking about, and you'll probably be able to have professional people there to help you get through various issues you might have with the death of a friend or something. My best friend committed suicide and I'm having difficulty dealing with that. Maybe if you go to this cafe, you'll be able to talk to somebody about it.
Yeah, we have these sorts of groups in most countries. Depending on the issue, it might be an Alcoholics Anonymous, where groups of alcoholics get together to discuss their situation and get support that way. They're called support groups. Sometimes they'll have support groups for people who are experiencing cancer or are dealing with somebody who has cancer in their family. And they'll get together and just kind of discuss what's going on in their lives. It's kind of nice just to talk to someone who understands your situation. Not everybody will understand what you're going through. And these support groups will get together just as a way to support each other and give somebody a platform or a safe space to talk about these sorts of things. Now, who gets involved? Well, these death cafes were set up back in 2019, and they're hosted regularly. So maybe not every week, but at least at a regular on a regular basis. Attendees range from 18 to over 80 years of age, and no topics are off limits. So attendees are people who attend something. They go and they participate, or they participate in whatever's going on. So how many attendees showed up last week at our conference? So those are just the numbers of people that attend.
And lots of people go. They range in age from 18 to over 80 years of age. And again, no topics are off limits. You can talk about whatever you want to. Another cafe is in Newark, UK. Not Newark, New Jersey, but this one is in the United Kingdom. And here, volunteers from care centers help people deal with grief, funerals, and more. So these are volunteers, people who are working without pay. They may be retired people who know a thing or two about this. My father is a volunteer at tax time. He knows all about filing taxes, and he volunteers at the library. People can talk to him if they have questions about filing their taxes. So he's a volunteer. Volunteer can also be a verb.
It sure can. So, yeah, that's great that they have these volunteers from care centers, and they come and help people deal with grief, funerals, and more. If you've been through any of these things yourself personally, you know that it's a hard time. You have to get things done because life goes on, life moves on for people. But at the same time, you're so sad and so grief-stricken sometimes it's hard to even think straight. So it's nice to have people who are a little bit removed from the situation. Maybe they don't know the person that passed away. It's easier for them to try to counsel you and help you through some of these things. So you might go there at one of these death cafes and meet somebody who can help you arrange a funeral. There are a lot of things you have to take care of. I had no idea it was so complicated. until my dad passed away, and I had to do a lot of it because he had made me someone who was in charge of his affairs after he died. So I had no idea, but there are a lot of things that the government requires of you that you need to take care of, and it would be nice to have someone that I could call and ask, for advice on this stuff. I just was online trying to find information as fast as I could.
Indeed, so maybe you would have benefited from such a cafe in Arizona there where you're from.
Right.
And they offer practical advice as well, including a life book covering everything that needs to be dealt with when a relative passes away, such as bank accounts and official documents. So here we're quoting life book. It may not actually be a book itself, but they probably have lots of information that covers all aspects of death, whether it's grief, dealing with the loss of somebody, or funerals, or things like that. And indeed, these volunteers can help you with these things if you're not quite sure what to do about your parents' estate. My parents passed away and they've got all this money and we don't know what to do with it. Well, they might give you some advice about what to do.
Oh, the government will take it. Don't worry.
Yeah, but maybe you can figure out ways to get a little bit of money there before.
I'm not kidding either. The government will take it, yeah.
It does sound like it makes sense. So it's probably, well, we could get into that
It doesn't make sense, but we'll move on, yeah.
It'd be a good idea to discuss these things before it happens so that the government doesn't get that stuff. But in any case, you'll discuss bank accounts and money and official documents.
Right.
A document, of course, is just some kind of piece of paper that is official in nature, and it's a contract usually, and you're going to have to deal with it because it's official, and you'll probably have to deal with lawyers and people like that.
A document can also be just a computer file that you created on your computer. Document. You'll often see documents referred to in emails. If you're at work, you'll have colleagues and coworkers that are constantly asking for you to email me this document. It's a digital file on your computer. We use it. You can also use document, guys, as a verb. But if you use it as a verb, it just means you're recording or reporting something in detail. So maybe there was an accident on the corner of your street and the police documented what happened and who was responsible. So you can document things that way too. I think one of these life books, though, that they're offering sounds like a great idea, and I wish I'd had one. This would have been nice because, of course, laws are different in every country and also every state. I found out the laws in Arizona aren't the same as they are in Utah and just other places. So it would be nice to have a group that put together something like this, a life book, to kind of guide you through.
These things do need to be discussed, so this idea of the Death Cafe isn't so scary after all.
No.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. And we don't have a Chinese teacher today, so we're going to bring this right to an end. And we hope you join us again next time for another edition of our program. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.